Okay, hey guys, welcome. Having a conversation today across the Atlantic with Seamus Russell, my brother, and we had a discussion. I'd say it's over about 6 weeks ago now, and we plan to circle back. But as we know, life has gotten really busy, and with what's happening globally as well, people have a lot of downtime. So we just think it's an opportunity. People have a lot of time on their hands, so we are circling back just to have a conversation about resurrecting the male divine and touching on a few of the topics that we discussed. And my name is Amy Russell. I'm a Kundalini yoga and meditation teacher based in Ireland, and I'm an intuitive as well, and I'm an agent for change. So Seamus, welcome today.
Thank you, sis. Great to be here again.
How are you doing through all this upheaval and big change in the world currently?
I suppose it's reflecting upheaval and change in my own world. And, I'm very connected to my First Nations brothers and sisters here out in Canada. So to be involved in that community, what's happening at the moment is they've been preparing for 7 generations.
Okay.
It's very prophetic, our current time.
Yeah.
And
I know they haven't, I don't really see it because I don't really watch mainstream news. I keep myself informed, of course. It's important to be well informed, but I haven't seen much about what has come out about what's happening in BC or in Canada in relation to the First Nations. Could you explain it a little bit, what's been happening?
I suppose it is not something happening to the First Nations, is how they've been forced to live as a society is being reflected with the white society now. We see reservations where they were only allowed to stay on the reservations. They had to have a pass to get off the reservations. And so what we're seeing is in the greater communities now, we see people who are not permitted to leave their homes, not permitted to express themselves in society and do what they want. So it's really a reflection of our First Nation brothers and sisters and how they've been living since contact, if you would.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I did. I would have lived in Canada on and off briefly, and I did an art residency many years ago, back in my other lifetime of being an artist. And I would have done a residency in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, which is the largest population of First Nations. And, I would have touched on I met a lot of them, and they would discuss, what was going on in their communities. And I would have touched base with an artist, the gallery that I linked in with at that time. And there was massive, last year I saw a load of stuff about it, massive issue with suicide and young people taking their own life on reservations. And because was a big part of my work as a community health worker, suicide and mental health, it's such a cry, and it's so heartbreaking that people are forced into these conditions, Seamus, on their own lands.
Certainly. Well, their own land, we're using the English language, which is a trap in itself.
Yeah.
All land here is owned by the head of the corporation, which is the Queen. In fact, we can't deny that. It's Crown land.
Yeah.
So they've been assigned less than 1% of the land here in Canada to thrive and not thrive, but to raise their families in poverty and poor conditions. But I was speaking more to, you can talk to the Hopi prophecy, you can speak to Crazy Horse. I was talking to some of my Sundance brothers and sisters, Sundance brothers today, and another holy man. And that's all that they're in, is keeping that fire in their heart, keeping calm, and understanding that we need to be strong and we need to be able to turn up after the change that's actually occurring in our societies. Yeah. So it's not like that this is a big surprise.
No.
Like the Irish, how many families have we been through? How much, hardship is part of our way of life. So just really interesting this the kind of spiritual component of what's going on is what I've been talking about. And they're the changes we're focused on, is what do we want to create and how do we need to recreate our communities and how are we going to relate to each other. Yeah, and what's important. I think people are really finding out what's important and what has value.
It's
you know.
it's unbelievable, Seamus, you know, what our core values and moving forward as a community and as a global community, and this, you know, overconsumption and this, what we've been doing to the planet. And I walked on Monday night or Tuesday night, it was the new moon. And, you know, the lack of cars on the road here in Ireland, it's just this certain energy, it's potent. And on the new moon, I could feel it. And what I felt was Mother Earth, she was taking a sigh of relief. She was like, you've stopped consuming, you've actually had to stop, and you know, you've had to go inwards. It's like that meme that I saw on Facebook. It's like, you know, we've been sent to our bedroom by Mother Earth to think about what we have done.
Yeah, and there's no sport to watch, and you know, all these distractions that are very much engineered as our culture, but they're not culture. And we see these channels being closed at the moment. So men don't have the distraction of hours and hours of sports every day or at the weekend.
That's really,
And
I think
so
it's really interesting to reflect on that, actually, Seamus. Yeah.
it is, yeah, because you know, I might check the horse racing results, or you know, soccer results, but I don't watch sport. I don't have any teams I support.
Yeah.
But in my community, I can reflect on men who do follow a lot of sports and how there's a huge gap
Yeah.
in their lives, and you know, they have to face themselves and face their partners and family, I suppose, you know, in some ways.
Yeah, massively. And I remember when I lived in Canada, it used to amaze me with some of the Canadian culture. It's like they're all very PC, you know. And then I'd go into a bar and they'd be watching like sports, you know, that blood kind of the sport.
UFC?
UFC, yeah, like really violent. Like in Ireland, we would like we show Gaelic football or Gaelic, you know, hurling
Yeah,
here.
certainly.
You know, and it is like even when we go to, I suppose, for the Irish sports, which are amateur here in Ireland, and they go back way back to Celts, and it was tribes coming together. But you know, we go to a match here in Ireland, and it's really friendly. There's no aggression. There's no maybe the odd time, but there's no of like the football hooliganism that's quite active in a lot of sports. You know.
Yeah, well, the reason is that this sport is a result of our culture. It's not been engineered. So there's a lot of history and a lot of pride, a lot of value, a lot of spiritualism. If you really look at hurling and you know how the hurley is made, the tree it comes from, you
Yeah.
know, as above, so below, from the ash tree, it's made from the roots. Very strong spiritual components to that, and it's as old as time.
Yeah.
So, but you look at the UFC, which is an sport, a very new sport, and that's engineered culturally by advertising and pushing them on a populace. So very different.
Yeah.
And
So,
you know, pro versus amateur, of course.
and it gets in touch with a very different part of the brain, Seamus, you know, for the human brain, doesn't it? It's the kind of animalistic, um, what's the word? I can't think of it now, but it just activates a really kind of predominant kind of old part of the brain within the human. You know, it's this fighting, this aggression, this war. And, you know, reflecting, just going back there, you talked about, you know, I know that Canada is still part of the crown. So it still recognizes as the queen. They still recognize the queen. It's on your money, isn't it?
Um, yeah, the Queen owns all the land here, and all government offices are agents of the Queen.
Okay,
So she is,
I didn't actually realize that. I knew there was so like an affiliation, but I didn't actually realize that it was so much power. Yeah.
yeah, very much so. I mean, she has the power to close or government over here. And ultimately, what we're seeing through the shutdown here at the moment is that the pipelines are still driving ahead through First Nations land. All of the labor camps that you see in different territories across Canada where there's infrastructure going in, none of them have stopped. They're flying in thousands and thousands of men as we speak all over Canada to continue the building of the fracking infrastructure, the bitumen infrastructure through pipelines. So that's happening at the moment while we have a shutdown. So the corporate machine is still moving ahead in self-serving goals that it's set for itself, you know?
Yeah, yeah, massively. I was Yeah, it's really interesting. I was trying to lighten the load today, and I was watching a comedian that I like, and he was like, the only people that are profiting from this shutdown is Zoom, which with the service that we're using. And he said,
Yeah,
I never heard of Zoom before, and I've heard of it 300 times today. So it really, that it's amazing that we can access this technology and keep in contact. And
yeah,
I was thinking about, I posted 5 letters today, and I put it out on Instagram. I said, who wants a letter? I had 5 stamps left, and I sent out some letters
beautiful,
just to people that I
nice.
don't know. And I was thinking back, the first text message was sent in 1992.
Yeah,
And then, like, just thinking in that length of time, it's like nearly 30 years, how much exponentially has happened within
yeah,
technology, within our modern culture. And if we think back then, like, we didn't get a phone. We both grew up together in Ireland, in West Cork, and we didn't get a phone into the house. You were 19 when we got the
I
phone.
was gone. I was just in my last year in college, and I could ring home then. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're in your last year with no phone. And but it was like, we're these energy beings. We're like homing pigeons. It's like we would go out and we would find each other just energetically. It's like, and if you made a plan, you turned up, or if you had a better offer, you might have, but you usually never left your besties down. And I remember the story that Mum shared the day that you were born. I don't know if you've heard this, that Dad rang our grandmother in the West End in Castleton-Bear, and they're all gathered around the phone. And for them, it was a phone. They were one of the only people that had the phone in that
Yeah,
town, because our grandfather at the time, going back, he'd already died a year previously. He was the fire chief. So,
yeah,
and our mother used to discuss that. She was saying, like, every time the phone rang, it was just, I felt it was a negative thing. So even our mum getting when we got the phone into the house, when I was 14 and you were 19, she hated the phone. She just felt that every time it rang, it was a bearer of bad news. And then when you were born, Dad rang excitedly, and he said, the baby's been born, and he hung up. So they never found out your sex for another 12 hours or something.
yeah. But do you know the ending of that story
No.
is that Nan went outside on the top of the town, West End, and she shouted out that Sheila Fitzgerald had her baby. Sheila Fitzgerald had her baby, so that all of the neighbours in earshot would hear it. So rather than a
Then, like,
text message,
lighting that fire, lighting.
lighting that, and of course, all the neighbours would know that Nan went into labour, and we have our own tradition of lighting candles when people are, when big things are going through people's lives, or we're praying for them.
Yeah.
So you can be guaranteed that Mam was held in a lot of people's hearts around the local community.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did write some letters myself as well, and doing way more reading at the moment as well.
Yeah. So it's interesting how we communicate, how we use communication, how we, misinformation and then miscommunication that happens through technology and text messaging, not hearing the tone of someone's voice. And then, we think, the internet is free, that information comes, but information has been more and more controlled, and the powers that be are controlling information. And you're researching for something, and it's just, yeah, it's before it used to be a lot freer, but the internet seems like a place that's really, really controlled, Seamus.
100%. I won't even get into that conversation. I've been working in technology my whole life. Finance, telecommunications, e-commerce. I mean, so yeah, there's like 6 main media companies globally that control about 95% of the media. So
Yeah.
you only get one wee slice for sure.
Yeah, and there's so, like, with what's happening currently on the planet, like, people are still homeless, people are still, going through so much upheaval. It's, life doesn't stop for people. That's the thing.
One of the biggest things I hope people can recognize is the relationship we have with our work, and the modern world of, we get educated, you go to work, but we're seeing these billion-dollar companies. We can see the relationship they have with their employees. Cut them loose,
Yeah.
no sick pay, and these are billionaires as well who are making these decisions. We've Jeff Bezos from Amazon looking for people to donate to cover the sick pay for his people. He's the richest man in the world. Now, if people don't understand how poor that relationship is and how we have to change, that is it on full display, I feel, at the moment, truly.
So, because
Yeah.
you broke there just at the beginning of that, so it's asking people to reflect on their relationship with their work. That's what you said was at the beginning.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, and how much onus we put onto that role in our life. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, how do people feel about that relationship to the work they committed to the employers they committed to, and how much time, energy, and investment, and how balances that relationship?
Yeah, and there's a famous book that a nurse would have written. I can't remember the name of the book, but she worked in a hospice and she would have cared for people that were dying the last few weeks of their lives. And it was a lot of men, and she would have asked them those top questions. What are your regrets? And, for a lot of people, it's like, I regret that I worked too much, didn't spend enough time with my family. We look in Ireland at modern culture and what's been created, lack of infrastructures, trains dismantled since the 60s. So there's so many cars on the road. People are working 2 jobs. Children are in daycare, younger and younger and younger, massive mortgages. And then this massive disconnect that's happening with the families as well. And working for those big corporations, Seamus, like you said as well, because Ireland has a lot of those companies here, and they have lots of people.
Yeah, they talk about the GDP in Ireland, they talk about the wealth, but people don't realize all of the shareholders of these big corporations don't live in Ireland. All that wealth is taken out of the country.
Yeah.
So it's not kept in the country. So it's a bit of a misnomer, really.
Yeah, it's massive. And this time of pause, it's like, I'm very blessed. I love my own company, but for some people who are really suffering, some people who are depressed, who have suffered from suicidal ideation, who are maybe in an abusive relationship, a narcissistic relationship, or, have the opportunity to go to work to escape that. People in situations who have to pay a mortgage, in situations where, frontline staff. Oh, like you have these I went to the post office. She's a frontline worker. She's dealing with people from 8 o'clock in the morning, and she was exhausted when I went to the post office. And it's like, they're being paid minimum wage, and then they're in the shop as well. All these people, they're frontline staff, not just the nurses, not just the doctors, people in shops that are feeding people, people going in buying food. These are frontline people.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. And we can see some of the the wealthiest corporations at the moment. There's a slowdown for a few weeks, and they're ready to collapse and fall over. They're leveraged so much. So I really, really hope we can take an opportunity to look at that and the modern culture of, just because you sell the cheapest, that means you can take over and you're leveraged to the hilt with debt. We're seeing the folly of that.
Yeah.
And and it's really putting people's lives at risk, period,
Yeah. And I was doing a bit of research, and I was looking back through history. So we go back over 200 years, 1700s. That's when the Industrial Revolution happened, okay? And that's the first time they coined that phrase, stress and pressure, the pushing together of 2 metals. So you're, assimilating people to go work, in these factories, or Industrial Revolution, just mass produce. And then if we go back another 200 years, we're kind of going back to the Dark Ages a little bit, it's 400 or 500 years. And that was kind of deconstructing for humanity, where their spirituality was connected to a person, to a priest, to a synagogue, to a rabbi, and they felt, whoever was representing that representation of God, it's like they would say, for you to get to God, you need to go through me. And these are the values that you have to live by, and these are the things you have to adhere to. And then people in communities recognizing, well, you're not adhering, and you're not in your integrity, and you're not of walking your talk or living these values. And so it's like people started moving away from that, and moving away from their spirituality and their connection as well. So then it's like, instead of this consciousness, this global kind of, you know, community consciousness, it's like me, let's see what we can, you know, gear up towards. And then moving into the industrial revolution, how can we as a human being in this physical vehicle, you know, get as much kind of material wealth as possible. And it's kind of like Spirit has been saying to me, it's like this subconscious thing. Humanity is crying out for change. This has been seeded within humanity for hundreds of years. It's just been escalating and escalating and escalating, and people are tired. People don't want to go on like this. People don't want to work that job. People don't want to be away from their children 5 days a week, working in cities, coming back, stuck in 2-hour traffic each way.
Yeah, I totally agree. The one thing about looking through history, Amy, is that a lot of it's whitewashed, and it can be quite murky if you don't really dive into a lot of books in libraries. You're talking about stuff being washed in the internet. There's a reason Ireland was occupied for over 800 years. We were like the last outpost of the old world, if you would, in Europe. Having a history of Brehan law in Ireland, like Brehan law is breathtaking, how beautiful that structure of law and that structure of how you live as a society. It didn't need to be implemented. Like Brehan law was, you know, our Ireland was run under Brehan law for millennia. And it was, women had equal rights, could own land, could own armies. And, you know, when the British came in, one of the first comments they made, if there's going to be a law, the Irish would have it. That's how complex and how comprehensive our way of living and the laws that helped us structure our society existed. So we want to go back to there to understand the different ways of living, the different ways of being. Like if you look at Cork City in the 1600s, you know, we had 8 different languages being spoken in the city. It's a huge trading post. You know, we don't hear about the you know, the Moors posted out of Cork and West Cork. Ireland was, you know, an island that was accessible by so many people from all over the world. But that's a conversation for another day. There's a reason we're called the Black Irish. You know what I mean? But most people don't know why.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation, and I definitely, I read a little about Breton law, but I actually haven't delved into it much. But knowing that everything is learnt orally as well, could you imagine what that does for your brain? And then, or you know, it's that elasticity. Whereas like you're like, how do I remember that number? I have to get a text message. You know, it's our brains aren't wired the way that they were.
Yeah, well, we've been forced. Like, I mean, the English language, you know, is very, very limiting, and it's a language of law, and it's a language of commerce, control. Whereas you look to our native language, it's a language of beauty, poetry, connectivity, and history, and culture. You know, and you know, our language is allowed to be fluid from tribe to tribe. And you know, once you have a language that's connected to your culture and to your environment, I mean, that's all the knowledge you need to how to live successfully.
I went to a yoga retreat up in the west of Ireland about 2 years ago, and we've been meditating, looking out at the wild Atlantic. It was so breathtaking.
Beautiful.
Just the ocean, and I'd feel, because Clare Island, I think Clare Island is off Mayo, and that's where, you know, Grania Whale, you know, it's still within our history, it's still within our memory as Irish people of Grania Whale, this pirate queen, you know.
Oh, amazing.
And she came in across the ocean to me, and she spoke to me and talked to me as an energy, as this beautiful goddess energy, and like to really embody and stand up for what you believe in, she was saying, you know. And like she wouldn't give up her lands. I think she was made destitute. I don't know, did she end up in England with the Queen? She had to talk to the Queen, or did she end up in the Tower of London? But that's still there, because for a lot of stories that are passed down, some of them go into the mists of time and become mythology. And we just look at God, you know, Queen Maeve, you know, when she'd go into battle, and if she was menstruating, the battle would stop for 2 or 3 days and then it would commence. Whereas in our culture, it is considered, even the advertising around menstruation, and it's like, smell fresh, ooh, it's just hideous, this advertising. And it's like, from a young age, as a woman, you feel it's this dirty thing that you have to hide, this little secret, this little thing. It's like, hush, hush, but it's like, and women, we give life, it's like, what, it's like, and then the comments and culture, the jokes, the throwaway comments from men as well. Oh, you on your period, or are you menstruating? Oh yeah, and it's so derogatory. And from as a young girl, you really, really feel it. So it's like, okay, so I just need to hide this, and I need to be tough, or a little more of a tomboy, and I know that you've 2 girls as well, Seamus, so
Yeah.
the language around it and the advertising.
Well, we call it, moon time. Really, is the word I use. God, the word period you can't get more on a word that has no emotion or meaning. A period,
Yeah.
But I totally agree. Touching on Gráinne Whale is really interesting, because you're touching into the heroes of our land, the powerful men and women. And a lot of our history on the sea has been wiped out completely. Like, we have O'Sullivan and Fitzgerald in our ancestors, and Fitzgerald were known as pirates. But you see, pirates is another derogatory term given to these great seafarers. Once you're maritime law, you're your own nation, you're your own. Once you have your own flag, that you're your own nation, you have complete sovereignty. And a lot of cultures and a lot of people from Europe use Ireland, because we still had that culture there, to be their own sovereign nations. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Yeah.
And of course West Cork as well. Yeah. But we got into this about the change that we're witnessing at the moment, and the opportunities of change. So I'm really sitting in a very calm space, and really appreciating the time, giving gratitude for what I really appreciate.
Yeah.
I went for a 6-7K walk at dawn this morning. So just holding that light in me in a very good way, and not giving over to the fear.
Yeah.
And thinking about what changes we'll need to be looking at in our society moving forward, what structural changes we'll need to look at, and what revolution is coming. Because there's a great saying, is no revolution was fought in a full stomach.
Yeah.
So it's usually through great pain and great change the revolutions start and change is executed.
Yeah, it's massive, and it's like that spark, it's like people are pushed and pushed and pushed, and it's just one little spark, and these people are just like, we've had enough, and it's realizing, Seamus, on the work that you do, and I know the work that I do. It's like, I just want to empower people, and when I worked in the community, I worked with a lot of young people that maybe were excluded from school because, they didn't fit into a certain box, and they weren't academic. Maybe they were creative, but that wasn't fed. They might have had, some schools even have art in their schools as
I know.
So then it's like these young people, being told in school they're stupid. And then I would work with these young people after, they'd leave school, and it was kind of like a back to work program. And I remember talking to these young people, and some of them were like 19, 21. And I said, it's coming up to vote. This is probably a few years ago. I said, it's coming up to vote. You should use your vote. And they're like, it's just their language. They felt totally disempowered. It's like people leave secondary school, high school, and it's like, for so long, since they've been assimilated since the age of 5, it's like, sit down, stand up, walk down the corridor on the left-hand side, walk back up the right-hand side. And then when they leave school, it's like, oh, you can choose, you can go to college and you can choose whatever you want to do. And no wonder they go bananas and go crazy. But it's just seeing how I see young people, how they're totally disempowered and not realizing, which the powers that be, those big corporations, don't want people to realize how powerful they are.
Well, there's a difference between education and indoctrination. and modern education is indoctrination, period.
Yeah.
I was walking through my youngest daughter's school last month, and it was, Black History Month in North America. And I was so offended that it's indoctrination. It's like the Black history started 400 years ago in North America. And just the wording and language, and it's indoctrination. The greatest continent in our history, the seat of civilization, and they've reduced it down to a month in our culture here, and it's terrible. It's indoctrination. I wrote to the school and I recommended some books that they read if they do really want to educate themselves.
Yeah.
One of them is the first 3 English books written in North America, and they're the books of sailors coming in, what they saw and who they spoke to. And there's been many cultures out in this land.
Oh yeah, so you just broke there for a second.
Sorry, yeah, I went black here. I was just checking.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's the indoctrination. It's not good to have young people to think, understand finances, understand the taxes, understand law, understand how to cook. These are really empowering gifts to give anybody, and the greatest thing you can give somebody is to think for themselves.
Oh, massively, Seamus. And
yeah,
I want to know the work that you do the work, working with men, and interesting, coming from an Irish culture, and I know we touched on it the last time as well, but helping to give men a voice, to empower men, to like you said earlier, it's like now men have to sit with themselves. They don't have sport, they don't have stuff to avoid, to avoid themselves.
Yeah, and they've been given a very limited band in which they can express themselves, in which they can turn up in as well. I've been doing quite a lot of work with archetypes with some of my clients, and inviting different archetypes into people's lives, whether it's the lover, whether it's the maiden, the mother, or the warrior. Like you've mentioned, Gráinne Whale. Where are those elements and those contrasts and values that archetype holds in our modern culture? We don't have them. And I think the last call we had, I mentioned that a man will tend to a garden different than a woman, thus conveying different ways of nurturement. And it is different from the masculine to feminine, but a lot of men don't see that. They're not permitted to turn up in that. So through the work of archetypes and asking probing questions, you give people indirect permission to say it's okay to feel this way, and I feel comfortable to express it this way.
Yeah, that's amazing, Seamus. And archetypes are such a powerful thing, whereas in modern culture for young people, their role models are very limited. And I know we touched on role models the last time as well, and we look at we look at these soccer stars as well, these soccer stars that are paid like ridiculous amounts of money, and this power going to their head, and then a lot of these people not falling off their pedestals, and not using their public image in a good way. And so it's
certainly, well, Hollywood is so corrupt, and coming from a very, very evil foundation, if you would. Break down the word Hollywood, it goes back to warlocks, and it goes back to witches. What do they make their little wand from? You make it from the holly tree. It's made out of Hollywood. And that's how to put spells on people, So Hollywood is an engineered culture to actually indoctrinate our youth on what they should desire, what they should have, and how they should turn up in their life, which is so artificial and so removed from the truth.
Yeah, so artificial. And then what Disney spend as well, and then the
very evil, very evil.
And the man coming in, the knight coming in on his white horse, rescuing the woman and they live
Oh
happily
yeah.
ever after. And as we know in our modern culture, and we know that as human beings, you know, there's so many different parts of us and feelings and emotions, and we're messy, and we're, you know, we get things wrong, we say the wrong things, you know. Of course there's that love, and you grow that love with a partner, and you know, but it's just, life is not it's this A to B. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't go like that. It goes up through valleys and down through rivers and across lakes and a wide expanse of oceans, and then you go deeper and you meet the dolphins and the whales, and then you come back up for air and you reassess things. It's just, it's not as clean cut as the way Hollywood pumps into
Agreed.
culture.
But you look to the, you know, the etymology of the name of the movies they use, whether it's Pocahontas. Well, look to the meaning of that word and what it means, and then how they shift the meaning of the words and transmit a very different message.
Mhm.
So yeah, very. I wouldn't support Hollywood or Disney at all. I think they're part of our engineered culture today. There's a reason for their existence.
Yeah, I heard
It's indoctrination.
when I was in art college, I did a lot of work around stories and fairy tales, and a big part of
Yeah,
how we genderize children as well, and you know, adhere to certain behaviors for a male and certain behaviors that's deemed appropriate for the feminine. And the
yeah,
research that I'd done on Walt Disney, you know, he was actually so gleeful around the movie Bambi. And when the deer died, the mother died, he was relishing in actually witnessing people being upset and children distressed, and creating
yeah.
that
Quite well, Walt Disney is quite a, like, if you just look to the history of him, they're all Masons. You know, quite an evil background. If you look at it, these are people who don't have values and don't convey that in their business. They're engineered for indoctrination, 100%.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but
We've touched on loads of different variations here, Seamus, on this conversation.
yeah, I think it's the mood, really.
Yeah.
We're going to see those structures, and we'll see these, you know, very powerful elements in our culture today, but they're engineered,
Mm.
and they're going to have no value. They teach us nothing, you
Yeah,
know.
it's really interesting. And I know that when we came on to have this conversation, we actually didn't really have an idea what we were going to talk about. And so beautiful and so organic that we just let the conversation flow. And really, really interesting, and definitely food for thought for me. I'm going to go and research Brehan law a bit more. So what are you doing, Seamus, to keep yourself grounded? You said you went walking this morning,
Yeah, I
meditating.
did I really did a lovely hour's walk at dawn this morning. I've been going to bed really early, so really reducing my screen time. I was off social media blackout for about 8 days,
Yeah.
so that really, really helped.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm the
You know,
same. I'd try and, yeah, because all my work is online, and yeah,
yeah,
a bit exhausting definitely, and people messaging. It's like I need a separate folder for all the memes that people have been sending me, you know, like
yeah.
day
I,
6
I feel
of
yeah,
isolation, you know. So I kind of in the morning, you know, I get up, do my sadhana, which would be my spiritual practice, not all the time, because in that
yeah,
respect as well, you know, it's letting go of that kind of yogic guilt. It's like my sadhana might just be getting up in the morning and having a cup of hot water and watching the sun rise. You know, it's like get on
yeah.
the mat, do your practice. It's like all that has really shifted for me. You know, it's good to have discipline in your life at certain times, and of course to have discipline every day in certain respects. But I think what's needed more is to be kind and compassionate and really, really
I
gentle. And from,
totally agree.
yeah, and
Kindness.
kindness. And it's like, you know, it's like this compassion to yourself. It's like you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And it's like I turn off my phone for like 6 hours at a time, and sometimes, you know, people might message and I mightn't get back to them for a few days, because you can get sucked into conversations and other kind of, you go down the rabbit hole, you know. And
Agreed.
you know, and as I know the practice that you do as well, and it's a practice that I do, is I honor my ancestors every day.
Very
And
much so.
I've shared in the classes, and I know you know this story, but I've shared with my students that our mother, she talked about, and I'd never heard that story around our grandfather. He lost twin sisters, and I think they were around the age of 4 or 5, and they died
Yeah,
during the Spanish flu, which was between 1914 and 1918. And Mum went to the
yeah,
grave when all this kind of started kicking off. Over 10 days ago, she went to the grave and she found their names, and that was
I
such
know.
a beautiful thing, you know, for her to go and get the names, and that we have,
I have,
you know,
I have Nora and Catherine, you know, and I'm honoring them every day. I have them, their names written on a heart with all
yeah,
the pictures of my ancestors. So it is lovely to be able to honor that.
and to
And
honor them. And it's like in so many cultures, I know in certain cultures, they really honor their ancestors, and I really feel it's a practice that we need to go back to. And um, Mum was like, I don't know, she was coming down from the grave, she's like, I'm really upset, I don't know why, I feel like I'm being over emotional and I'm crying. And I said, Mum, you discussed, you said your grandmother was, you know, her mental health suffered after that, you know, they were probably quarantined, and Mum kept using that word shame, that or her would be our great grandmother, but it was her grandmother, felt so much shame around losing the twins. And I said, Mum, I said, what you're doing is Mum, what you're doing is you're expressing grief that probably wasn't been able to express at that time, going back through your lineage. So let yourself feel it and release it for your grandmother.
agreed. I think, Amy, a lot of people in Western culture don't understand the connection with our ancestors and what that actually means. We have life force, like they walked a path before us to get us to this place, space, and time.
Mm.
And there's power in that. And we have blood running through our veins, their blood,
Mm.
their DNA, their experiences.
Yeah.
So it's not like the Catholicism where you pray and give thanks to a kind of an object and, you know, a figure or something in the past. Today, in this moment, that power is available to us as living beings from our ancestors. It's a gifting, it's a birthright.
Yeah.
And the more we pray and the more we honor it, the more we'll actually understand and open up what that actually means. It's
Yeah.
our birthright as human
It's a
beings.
complete birthright, and people, you know, it's, you know, the original form of praying was meditating, you know, just sitting with your breath, sitting in nature, being with that energy, you know. And it's, our minds are so fragmented, we're being pulled here, pulled there, and to just be able to sit. And the angels have been saying to me for days, it's like, Amy, we want you to drop into your heart, we want you to sit with your soul, because your soul is calling to you, and you need to quiet your mind so you can hear the callings of your soul. And that energetic heart space that radiates out that energy will attract what you need into your life. And, you know, it's a big part of my work, healing the ancestral line. And there's a book that I read, it's really interesting. It's Mark Wallen, and it says, it didn't start with you. All his work, really, really interesting. You know, people turn up in his office and they go, I don't know why is this happening to me? And he'll talk, and he'll look back through their history, and they'll figure
Yeah,
out an ancestor had gone through something similar, or something had happened, and it was like a blockage in the lineage. So that, you know, it doesn't die with that person. You know,
agreed.
you know, if they acted out of integrity or they didn't act in alignment, you know, because if we think back to what our ancestors went through, you know, on their hands and knees looking for food, starvation, you know, the famine, you know, complete like base survival, nothing about around pleasure. And it's like, you know, going back, it's like you have to go back to unblock that, you know, and then that energy
Yeah,
will free up.
yeah, agreed. Admit, accept, and allow the truth to be the truth. You know what I mean? And to honor that, give that experience, and to recognize it.
Mm.
And, you know, I don't use the word famine anymore, because it wasn't a famine. Some of the crops did fail, but it was an assertive, strategic move by the British Empire to use food, weaponized food. Um, you just look at the amount of food on any given day leaving the port of Dublin through the famine, and you'll understand how abundant we were at that time. But the machine chose to starve us instead.
Yes.
So I'm very much about truth, and very much about reading history and reading, you know, the right books, Because if we went on the internet today, you get a real washed down version of the truth,
Yeah.
you know.
So
And we can.
what book would you recommend to read around the starvation that happened?
Well, you know, I suppose I'll be a member of different groups, and Brehan Law would be one group I'm a member of. So I really learned so much through these groups and do
Okay.
courses.
Brilliant.
Um, Forgotten Pasts. You know, I've different feeds that I'm part of, but it's a fact is written down, and a fact is usually on a contract or a document that's stamped by a court.
Mhm.
So if you go to our exports as a country, you just know where to go and look for them, and you can see the receipts of all of the exports. So it's how to think and how to verify facts rather than look at data and information.
Mhm.
Facts are way different than information and data.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
you're saying the documents are there from that time going back in.
very much so, very much so. And I think I've always been very, very passionate about the truth, even how painful it is. But it's very, very important to tell the truth and pass on the truth to our new generation, because we need to learn from the past, not have it whitewashed and continue.
Yeah, totally, Seamus.
Yeah,
That's so we're going to leave the conversation there for today.
no worries.
We touched on
Yeah,
many interesting things, but as you said, it's, you know, it is of its time and what we're sitting in at the moment. And I think it's just been a beautiful conversation, and we touched on so many different things. And, you know, if you want to share just briefly around your own work and how people can reach out to you through
yeah.
readings.
Thanks, Amy. The offerings I've been working with for 20 years. I've been studying this stuff. Most of it's in conscious sexuality, doing Taoist studies, helping men and women understand the depths of their being and what pleasure and how they can use their sexuality, working with intimacy, and just it's so varied the clients I have, whether it's self-love, whether it's abuse, whether it's limited scripts being given by their parents, but ultimately it always goes down to self-love and how they can express themselves when in a relationship with another person. So you can relate well to yourself, or feel love for yourself. You certainly won't be able to generate anything different in a relationship, you know.
Yeah, definitely, Seamus. And it's
Yeah,
where a lot of people, and for which we've been doing for a long time, is looking outside externally for that love, for that validation, for those physical objects to fill our homes. And then it's like, you know, really it's about the inner work. And the work that I do is I'm a Kundalini yoga and meditation teacher for nearly 10 years. I'm an intuitive healer, shamanic practitioner, and I hold a lot of space for men and women as well.
hmm,
And I touch on many different topics as well. It's a lot of the topics that you raised as well. And
certainly.
I offer retreats, and I do online programs. And it's just, I think what comes back to mind is, you know, the last conversation we had, I just remember it was so potent, that sentence that you used. You said, this is bigger than us, Amy. You know, it's like, this is bigger than us, and we're being pushed. We need to go out there. We need to share in this work. We need to show up, because it's bigger than anything we've ever experienced in our lives, you know.
So, and I totally agree. There's no better work to be doing than wanting to, bring some knowledge, wisdom, healing, pleasure, unlocking, lifting limited scripts for somebody else's life so that they have a better life. That's really it, you
Yeah,
know.
it's
And through our own experience and pain and training and all that, just to convert that and hopefully create that invitation for people to pick it up. It can be hard for people to pick up change as well, the healing they want.
Yeah, because as we know, Seamus, and I know myself personally, my own journey, it wasn't an easy road, you know, and it's to go into some of that pain and to go look at some of those old scripts and those old stories and those old woundings. It's very, very painful, but the truth will set you free. And it's really not as scary as it is, especially when you have a safe container and you have somebody there lovingly supporting and just witnessing you. You know, I just think It's a really beautiful thing.
Thank
And
you.
you know, our passions and what pushes us forward by spirit, by our own training. Yeah, we just keep going, brother. And thank you so much for joining me today. And
Likewise,
we'll
sis.
continue this conversation,
Thank you, sis.
whatever way this is going to weave for us. And you're educating me as well, Seamus. And thank you so much. And we'll connect again over the next few
Thank you
days.
too, sister.